Good afternoon, everybody. This is John Greenwood. He's our local mini mechanic here in Jacksonville, Florida, and he's going to explain to you what we're going to be doing today.
We have about a 1990 single port injected mini engine. It was removed from a driving car until it locked up, and the guy told us the transmission had locked up, and I don't need the transmission. Actually, the car's going into is right behind the camera, and all I need is the block, because my block smokes. Even though I just rebuilt it, put new rings and all in it, it just refuses not to smoke. So I'm going to rebuild another block, and that way I'll be able to swap it out and have it ready to go in a matter of a couple of weeks instead of taking a couple of months without the car. So today we're going to just basically pull the block, take the block apart, see what kind of parts it needs, and we're going to take a look at the transmission and kind of see what made the transmission die, because they're usually that's pretty odd for these. It's not very common for one to actually lock up. I've seen it once before, but the car was extremely beat. This guy, the car was actually in fairly nice condition, and he decided instead of rebuilding this engine, he was going to put a Honda VTEC in it, and that's the way he went. So his loss, our gain. We get the block out of it.
Now, John, I know that Mini has had several different size engines in their lineup of cars throughout the years. What size is this?
Okay, they started out with an 850 for the first few years, and then they went to a 998, pretty much common. The 850 ended up, I think they stopped making the 850 and sometime in the early late 80s, somewhere along in there. And the 998 was the standard engine for the most cars. The 1275 was the largest they made. This is an A+ 1275, and it's got an A+ clutch on it. You can identify that by the angle on the slave cylinder. It was an SPI, and you can tell that it has a little hole there where the crank sensor went, and it has actual thermostat housing here, and the water pump has a eyelet here for the alternator to pivot. The MPI, which is a multi-point injection car, came after this one. The alternator is mounted up here. It had the radiator across the front instead of here, so they used a different water pump. No distributor at all on those engines. This one has a hole here for the distributor and a clamp for it. The MPIs did not have that. They used the crank-fired ignition, and it had a coil pack up here that used wasted spark.
Now, this is the biggest engine they
from the factory.
From the factory. Now, I mean, is there a physical difference in the size of the engine?
The engines, the basic block, I don't know if they're exactly the same, but the basic block you can put on this transmission. You can put an 850 anywhere up to a 1275. So the physical package is almost exactly the same.
Okay.
They've juggled the bores around so they can get bigger bores, and then they stroked it. But the transmission and the transfer case, they're the same. So I could put a 850 engine in this car and run around, but an 850 is a little underpowered.
Gotcha. How many horsepower was the 850 doing?
I want to say 32 horsepower.
And this one?
I think these stock, I think the SPI was, gosh, around upper 60s, 70s for SPI.
So almost double.
Yeah. Well, the engine, half again as much. Better fuel distribution with the injection. This had a throttle body injection. It sat back here and fed this is a 5-port engine, and if I turn it around, you can see it's got 3 exhaust ports and 2 intakes.
Okay. So you're going to be doing a complete engine overhaul on this one?
Except the cylinder head. I don't need the cylinder head.
Okay. And where we start first?
Well, we're going to strip it all down and pull off. I want to get as much off as I can before I split the transmission from the engine, because the transmission, or the engine rather, weighs 100, 200 pounds, whatever, and so you use the transmission as a nice stand to hold it. And then, like I say, when everything's off, then we can actually have the head off, because that's right 40, 50, 60 pounds right there.
Okay.
Get the bare block, and then we can flip the block up, take it off, because I can do that by myself usually, and then we can see down to the transmission and see what we see.
Now, on these mini engines, the transmission is actually from here down, right?
Yes, it is. Let me turn it around here, and you can see differential inside here. There's the shifter right in there that goes in and out and then rotates. Speedo drive. This is the radiator mount. Clutch slave cylinder.
Are these the CV joints? Is it?
Those are CV joints that would go out to the two front axles.
Okay.
And it's really front engine drive. This is the back of the engine. You can see the axles are here, so this is technically in front of the front axles, so it's definitely front wheel drive. That's pretty much it. You can see 5 ports here to pull off the whole gasket. You see, got 2 intake ports that are round, and then the 3 exhaust ports. Timing chain case.
And you got a little water pump up here?
Water pump right here. It'll be thrown out. These out of something you save, and I'll be using most of the stuff off my other engines. So like the timing chain, I put a fancy one on there, timing gear and all like that, and we'll dial in the can and do some things like that.
Okay. Where are we getting started?
Well, we're going to start. I think we're going to pull the flywheel first, only because it'll lighten it up, make it easier to turn around because it's so heavy. So let's turn it around this way.
This one?
Yeah, there we go. Okay.
I'm going to zoom in closer to you. Is the engine metric or SAE?
The only metric you're going to find on this engine, this late one has some odd metric threads on it, but not very many. The Mini was pretty much SAE its entire life. I'm trying to think. The only metric I can think of are some on the brake system, like the master cylinder. I think some of the late master cylinders had metric.
Okay.
A lot of these bolts I can throw in the tub, and I've just done enough of these that I know what they all are for, so I don't have to sort them. But some areas I get into the engine, and even if I've done so many of them, I still don't remember one from the other, so I try to sort them out.
Okay.
And let's see, let's go.
That was easy.
Okay, this is the clutch release bearing. This is kind of frozen right here. I'm not going to reuse this clutch anyway, so I'll just check it. Because the Mini's so easy to change the clutch on, I probably would reuse this with no problem. You can change this in a couple hours and you don't have to pull the transmission. Mini's one of the few cars you can do a clutch sitting in a chair in front of the car.
Oh, that's kind of nice. Okay, I'm going to stop the video for just a second and get closer to what you're doing here. John, kind of describe what you're doing for us right now.
Okay, right now I have to take off the big nut here. This holds the clutch on the end of the crankshaft. It's got a locking tab inside, and I'm just knocking back the lock ring. You really don't have to do it, but it only takes a second.
Okay.
Now this engine is locked up because when this guy took this out of the car, he pulled one of the spark plugs out for whatever reason, I don't know, and let it sit in the weather. So water got in the number 2 plug, and it's so that the crank is frozen up.
Okay.
Hopefully we're going to be able to fix that.
And that's the bolt that holds the clutch plates in place?
Well, that holds the flywheel clutch assembly to the crankshaft.
Okay.
Because when I take this apart, you'll see the mini crankshaft is different than most others. Most other cars has the crankshaft, the rear of the crankshaft ends in a round face with holes drilled on it, and the flywheel bolts to it. Well, the Mini, the pressure plate is here, obviously, but the spring is on this side, but the pressure plate's on the back side.
Okay.
And this is the flywheel right here. That actually bolts to the crankshaft, but you can see it's also part of, there's the ring gear for the starter. It's convoluted, but it actually works very good. They use the Verto because people complained about juddering of the original style clutch, but they made millions of the other one, and I never had any trouble. I ran it in my own car, and I prefer the earlier clutch.
Now, are you going to replace this clutch here? Does it need...
No, I just reuse my old clutch.
Okay.
This will go in our spare box. Okay, let's see here. These are few of the metric fasteners. I noticed these are metric, but it's the Verto clutch is a new item, and they changed a few things later in the life of the car.
Now, is there any reason why you're not using an impact driver for
These
that?
are very shallow.
Okay.
That's the only reason. I can hold this on with my finger, and they're not torqued real tight. It's more they've been in here a long time. I have reason to believe this engine has never been messed with before, but I could be wrong. I'll know more as I take it apart.
Okay. I'll stop us there and wait till you get that off. Okay, John's going to get a special puller in order to take that flywheel and clutch assembly off.
Every Mini owner, they don't have one of these. They need one.
Let me take a look what you got there.
This puller is for removing the flywheel on a Mini. It's got 3 bolt holes here, and it should come with 6 bolts because the later Verto used a metric hole, whereas the earlier one was SAE.
Okay.
So I can look at these bolts here and I can see that the fine threaded one is for the earlier cars, that's SAE. Washers. And those are all 3 fine threaded. And just so I can put them up here, you can see there. The coarse thread, that's metric.
Okay.
Had this tool a long time. These washers have been up a lot.
Now, is this tool that is something you can easily obtain?
Yes, any of the mini suppliers have
have
these
this?
tools. Yeah,
Okay.
it's probably the one most common special tool for a mini.
Okay. And what kind of cost we talk about, something like that?
You know, these things used to be $10 or $15, but I mean now they're probably 40 or 50 at a guess. They got to be thick because this thing is held on by a lot of pressure.
Okay.
There's not unusual for people to go to take this off and they crank down on this bolt and it will not come off, and you walk away all mad and you turn your back to it and 5 minutes later you hear the loudest
Pops
pop
off.
in the world and this thing just snaps off. Some people have to heat it. I mean, we'll see. That's all I can tell you. When you put it on here, it's always fun.
Okay.
These washers are used a bit. Okay, you got a little button. This little button fits right in the center so you don't booger the threads or any of the hole up.
Right.
And it should fit right under this bolt here in the middle. So let's start one of the bolts. You see there's a round hole in 3 spots. First one in. I try to do it to where the threads are equally exposed so that all 3 bolts are in the same amount.
Okay.
You're in a movie here?
Brenda,
I've just put my
Please.
shoe on.
go inside.
I've put my shoe on.
Anything? How long does it take to put a shoe on?
There we
Tell me
go.
when.
We're live.
Okay. I've mounted the puller. I've made sure that all 3 bolts are roughly run into about the same. I've got the button in there. The button's going to protect the threads. You really don't have to crank this much. If this car did not have a frozen crankshaft, you'd have to keep the flywheel from turning. Now, sometimes we put like a screwdriver into the ring gear right here.
Right.
But if you've got an old main bearing laying around, you can put the main bearing inside here and it'll catch in the teeth. And as you turn it, it'll wedge itself in, and this will actually do a really good job unless this thing is so tight. I've actually seen these mangle, and you can see this one's already twisted.
I've just come up with an excellent idea.
All right, Brenda, that's enough.
Are you
All right, take 2. There you go.